Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today is week 18 of building Hogwarts in Lego. Now, I just found what was really funny from standing back right here. It looks like Hogwarts is less complete than it has, say, if you were to take the video from 5 weeks ago, week 13 or something. Hogwarts actually looked more complete at that point than it did now, just because we're tearing things apart left, right, and center in order to get to the bits underneath. And then, of course, speaking of underneath, in the last few videos, we've been focusing on this area over here and getting all the interiors of the dungeons done. Last week, we did the potions classroom and the Slytherin common room. If you haven't watched that video, I would highly suggest going back and giving it a watch. It was pretty fun. In case you want a teaser, that's what the potions classroom ended up looking like. Now this week, of course, I told you that we were going to be focusing on the Hufflepuff common room, and I decided to jumpstart the video by actually getting some progress done. Okay, so once again, I'm going to have to apologize for the absolutely terrible lighting, but for once, it's not actually my fault. I've been working here in the dark for about 2 hours now, so this is as good as it gets, trust me. But in any case, here's the Hufflepuff common room, and as I was saying in last week's video, essentially, I'm using the 3 arches. Oh, no, that is different. I'm going to retract what I just said there. In last week's video, I said that it was going to be 2 arches wide and that these 3 would be dedicated towards the corridor. But what I ended up deciding was that that was going to be way too small for what I wanted for the Hufflepuff common room. So I decided to make it 3 arches wide. How did I do that? Well, the main reason why I thought it was only going to be 2 was because of this pretty tricky area right here, where you can see the parts are very, very close together, and they are just working. Now, of course, this is the bit of the staircase that goes down into the dungeons. That building, the staircase tower, is right above it. And if I were to make that a normal rectangular room, that obviously wouldn't be possible unless you had a big bit jutting into the space. However, I've been referencing this book primarily to build a Hufflepuff common room, and the main gist is that it's circular, or at the very least it's not rectangular. So I've been trying to take cues from that and figure out ways in which I could make the room somewhat rounded and imply that this is half of the room and the other half would be here, if you will. Now, I initially thought about just using these sort of wedge panel pieces, and I was going to do something like that and kind of make it triangular in nature, but I wasn't entirely convinced with how that turned out. I did want some very obvious curves. So I ended up coming up with a design that's a little bit of a mix. So it's the inside of the panels as well as these sort of quarter arch curve pieces, whatever you want to call them. They're the same pieces that you use to make towers like this right here. And it is a little bit of a weird shape, especially when you look top down. It's quite interesting, but it works, especially when you look at it from this angle down here. It definitely doesn't look too strange or out of place. So what you can see here is the main entrance to the Hufflepuff common room. I'll just try to get in a little bit closer. So this is built in primarily 2 different parts. There's the round porthole in the background, which is just using a 1x6 arch piece with the corresponding bits on the bottom. Now that I basically stole from the Lego Astronomy set. And then I've got this just very simple design. I believe this piece at the top is from a Simpsons set. But when you put the 2 together, they look pretty seamless like that. And it just fits quite well. And there's some steps leading up to the porthole. We've got a fireplace over here. And of course, we've got some of the paintings in the panel pieces just to bring the scene a little bit to life. So my original thinking was that the main entrance to the Hufflepuff common room was going to be right here. And the reason being is just because this is where the spiral staircase is. You come down and I have an actual functional doorway just right there. So it would make sense to use this as a hallway and you enter into the Hufflepuff common room. But then I started thinking that it didn't really make much sense in terms of how I would configure the actual room itself. This is a lot nicer. There's a bit of symmetry going on. I've got the doorway smack dab in the middle. And frankly, the doorway has never really been much of a feature in any of the rooms because it's always just been against a side wall and it's always about the space itself. This one is the space, but really it is the door because it's such a unique feature. It's a barrel on the other side, etc., etc. So it's a little bit different. You don't see the Hufflepuff common room as much, so the doorway is a special part of this. In terms of what we're going to be doing with the rest of the space, so the actual common room itself, I'll take you back to the book to explain it. It's quite simple, but everything is really quite organic and round, dark woods, etc. So we've got, you know, this circular bench over here, circular tables, circular doors in the walls, circular portraits, hanging plants. Everything is just very soothing, if you will, and curvy. So we're going to just put some comfortable furniture, put in lots of brown wood pieces everywhere as much as we can, and we're going to definitely be throwing a lot of plants into this space. That is going to fill this space quite quickly, to be fair. If we've got the fireplace here, if we put a sofa, round table, maybe some few chairs, some students walking, all of a sudden it's going to be quite full with some planters in the corners. It'll turn out to be a really, really cool common room. And then we have this space over here, which of course is where we have an actual doorway into the stairwell. Now I'm thinking that I'm going to actually reconfigure how this works out here. I might actually remove the doorway entirely. And the reason being is because I actually think I want to make a doorway from here, similar to this one, that leads to the dormitories. And then this can just be a little vignette of what the dorms would look like as part of the Hufflepuff common rooms. Reason being is because of space concerns, we didn't actually have anywhere to put the beds in the Slytherin common room, but because we have this space to work with here, I think it makes sense to put some beds for the Hufflepuff common room, and it fills the space quite nicely. And frankly, no one cares to look at a hallway anyway, so I think that's a better use of the space. Now, some of you might have been wondering what I'm going to use the space behind this area of the Hufflepuff common room for, just because, you know, I didn't use the full extent of the depth, even though I technically could have with this bit over here. I am just going to use it for structural support. There isn't really anything here that's crucial that I need to show off, especially with the Great Hall backing right up onto it. So it's just going to be used for some filler brick to make sure that this is nice and secure. Another small thing we'll have to do is just lower that bit in the corner and this bit over here to match the new heights of the dungeons. That was a lot higher before, just because originally I was going to have a Slytherin common room with this holographic panel piece, and it was sitting just about right there. You can see how that matches up roughly with the height of the Great Hall, so that's why that was at that previous height. I can now lower it, and it also means that I'll just have to do a bit of modification when it comes to how this building lines up with the Great Hall. So it'll be fairly small details and you won't notice it at all, but they will need to be done. And then lastly, before we get on to any more building, what I have here is a little prototype, if you will, of the building that would sit on top of the Hufflepuff common room. This would be exposed on the regular ground level of the castle. Now here would be the staircase tower, and here's this back garden area. Now with all of it going to be a level surface now, it's a lot easier to work with, and this is just going to go immediately centered above the Hufflepuff common room, something like this. And the idea of it in the Hogwarts Legacy game, of course, is that this acts as a skylight, and around the edges are just little portholes that just draw some light down into this dark space. I don't think I'll be able to actually do it with this, just because of wanting to use as little pieces as possible so that I can salvage them for other bits of the mock. It's just going to sit something like that, and it's more for aesthetic than anything else. But that's a prototype, and that's roughly where it will go on the finished mock. All right, so you'll have to mind the mess a little bit, but we have done a decent bit of progress on the Hufflepuff common room over here. You can see immediately that I've gone ahead and actually done a bit of the interior going on, and we've also started a little bit on the roof right over here. I just had to take apart the filler brick that was down in here, and we're just experimenting very slightly with some wedge plates to see what we need to do to line up this area back here. There's a little bit of an issue with the fact that I have these bricks in a different orientation over here, so I can't actually connect the plate up. So I either have to lift this plate up one, or I'll have to drop those, which is probably the more easy solution. And then I'll have to sort of tile off the top so that this will just rest on the same plane as that. But anyhow, we'll focus on the actual Hufflepuff interior that I've been working on. So apart from basically decorating the walls with a few portraits and flags and such, all I've really done on the interior, just to bring it a little bit to life, is to put a little sofa in here, some globes, one globe to be specific. And then I've just stolen this from the Astronomy Tower set, which is basically from Slughorn's party, but I thought it would be a nice little inclusion because I didn't really know where else to put it. And then, so apart from this, what I'm going to be doing now is actually putting in quite a lot of plant life, because that's something that makes the Hufflepuff common room quite distinctive. We're going to have to fill the fireplace just in here, and just all the little bits and corners. But apart from that, this is the main space, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. It's a very simple interior, but once we put a bunch of minifigs in there, some plant life, and then of course we cover it up, it's not going to really be a huge problem. And then of course the last thing is I've made a little porthole, if you will, right here, and this is the little extension of the Hufflepuff common room, which is supposed to be the dorms. Now some of you might have noticed that I've stolen essentially the beds from the hospital wing. This is what they typically look like, and I've just stripped them of their white base, and I've put a little just kind of brown framed bed around it, and I think they're quite simple and they do the trick, and it looks quite nice. Plants are a go. Just very simply threw a few up in the corners above the doorway there, and all it means is that when you look through now, things look a little bit more bright and cheery. All right, so before I put the last few pieces, I'll just show you a little bit of what I'm doing over here. So basically, I've just put some filler brick in behind this area over here, and I filled it a little bit with the rock wall in this section. I was talking about this area being on a slant from the rest of the plates going in this direction. So all I've done is I put a layer of plates and then some tiles on it, so that when I put these final pieces right here, that will sit right on top and it will fit quite comfortably and snug right in that little gap right there. So at some point I somehow miscalculated how big I need to make this space, because what I've got here is an 8x16 plate, which is just one stud too wide to fit in this space. So I just had to really quickly come up with just a very shoddy structural support to put just an extra row of plates so that I can have it 7 wide here. But that's just another kind of one of those things that when you start building you didn't really think about, and then when you get to the end you realize you kind of shot yourself in the foot. But it's all right, I had the pieces to do it. Got many more pieces to do it many more times if I need to do that. So we're just going to cover up the top here, creating a new slate. I've had to rip up a little bit of the area around where the tower was already, and then we'll start trying to figure out how we might want to cover up this space. And then another small issue you might notice over here is I've got this weird flex going right down the middle of the mock. And if we'll come around the side, you can kind of see how it's bowing in 2 directions. Now, initially I thought it's because the tables might not be completely lined up, and that is somewhat the case, but it shouldn't be causing that much of a flex in the bricks. So I think I've had something pulled a little bit weirdly, so I will have to fix that at some point, but for the time being, we're good. All right, so a clean new layer has been finished. We've plated it all off just around to the corners over here. And well, it's very simple. It's really nice to look back and go, right, I've got a clean, fully ready area to start working on. The next steps I'm going to show you is I'm going to quickly grab the grand staircase tower and plop it back over here along with the other buildings very roughly, just to reintroduce the people who might not have seen it before, and show you a little bit of how I'm going to work around the areas on the back. But before we do that, we've got one last thing down here in the Hufflepuff common room, and that's to fill up this fireplace. And then I'll do a quick run through of what I aim to do with the rest of this area, and we'll call it there for a week. Now I did have to rip up the arches in the roof a little bit, but we've got a fireplace finally. I didn't actually have the right pieces to do what I wanted, so instead I used a bunch of those ink pots and put a bunch of flames on top, and it kind of did the trick. You know, when you stand back it looks like a fireplace, but it's not the most conventional way of doing it. But in any case, we're going to quickly rebuild this, and I'll get on to the top. So these buildings have been very quickly placed up here. They're not really hooked down, and they're definitely not hooked down straight. They're just there for show, just so that I can give you guys a better idea of the space that we're working with back here. Because this is really the first time that I'm seeing it along with you guys. Now this is the prototype-ish that we designed at the beginning of the video of what I wanted to be that sort of skylight porthole thing that goes in the middle of this garden over here. But now that I put it here, it works, but I think it's a little bit too large for the area that we have. So I'm going to think about shrinking it quite significantly, because this takes up, it just dominates the entire space where I'm not even able to put any paths or real gardens to it. It's a top-down view of what it would look like. It just doesn't really work with the rest of the scale of Hogwarts. Now, in terms of what I want to do throughout this whole section, typically there is 2 walls that extend right here, and this would form the quadrangle, or the quad courtyard, sorry, of this west wing of the castle. But I'm thinking of actually leaving it both empty on either side, potentially blocking off on this side, so that I can have access to this whole area for minifigs and display and such. So if this is a gardens, I'm imagining that it flows right into this area. Now what that means is I'm also thinking of making another entrance into this building down here, so that we can actually move in and out of the grand staircase tower out into this back garden. And of course you can access the back of the Great Hall from here. Some of the modifications we'll need to do is this little corridor right here will need to be lifted up 1 row of bricks. Before, it was actually sitting a little bit higher based on just the level of the area back here. But because I lowered it all down to be flush, that means I need to build that one up higher. And then, of course, in terms of the inside of the grand staircase tower, that staircase needs to continue up. Now, what I'm thinking, based on just what I know, the parts that I have, and what I really want to show to you all is, I've made this cutout, and this is the opening that I want to show you all. So it would be really nice if I get the staircase just to about here, and it wouldn't need to continue any further, just because you wouldn't really be looking up like this. So if I could get to that point, I'd be able to have a fully working, fully functional staircase tower interior, and with doors and access points, so that the inside and the outside is all one cohesive space. And here's just a look of what the area looks like from the other side. You can see that I had already tiled off most of the area, and this is pretty much finished. You can see what this area looks like back here. Now this is going to look quite different from the front, because this is a dedicated garden, and I'm going to try to incorporate some benches and some general greenery and such, so that it's looking more like this area over here. So with this episode wrapping up, we basically have a finished dungeon interior down here. If I'm to lower myself down, we've got some few vignettes of the Potions classroom, Hufflepuff dormitories, and Hufflepuff common rooms, respectively. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to be focusing on this upper platform over here and getting that done to the same extent as those lower dungeons. Now, I do just want to apologize for the very long wait between episodes. With Christmas and exam periods, I was very, very busy and wasn't able to dedicate the amount of time that I needed and able to pump a video out. But now that we're back in January, I'm really hoping to stay on a weekly or bi-weekly schedule and able to pump out videos for you guys as much as possible. So thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to see you all in the next video. Bye now.